Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company, episode 134. I'm your host, as always, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like usual, Kyle, Jessie. And Kyle, today we have a special guest, Mr. John Cruz, not only a Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, but also a father, an industry professional, a business owner, an innovator, an advocate, so many different things that John Cruz, so many hats that he wears, and I'm excited to get to talk to him today. A lot of our podcasts this year, Kyle, have been recaps and previews of events and winners, but throughout the summer and in the fall, when it starts to slow down, I can't wait to get more of these stories from guys just telling their background, how they got here, and every twist and turn along the way for their story.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, John Cruz may be the most busy man in the sport of bass fishing. I think that sometimes we take for granted that we think we're busy, but John Cruz is steady at it all the time. Obviously, got a little bit of gap in the Elite Series right now, but I bet he's getting ready for ICAST and plenty of other things. So, John, thanks for joining us, and who knows what today will hold, but we're going to have a good time with it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on. Actually having a little family vacation right now, so that's kind of a nice little change of pace for us.
I don't want to flood the beaches with fans looking for autographs, so we won't disclose where you're at this week when we're shooting the podcast. But
yeah,
obviously,
undisclosed sandy location.
Yes, I mean, you at this point, maybe a couple more D-bombs get sold, you'll have your own island or in your own beach. Like it'll be it'll be roped off. You can't walk past this place unless you're on the bomb squad. John, let's just go straight to the beginning. You've been on the Elite Series since its inception in 06. You're an OG-er, as we call it, one that's been here for every single season. But before that, I look back at your bass history in 2001, 2000. That range was really when you started fishing B.A.S.S events. Tell us about John Cruz pre-2000 and how you even got to the point to start signing up for big-time Bassmaster tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of an interesting culmination, I would say, as far as getting into the sport. I just, during high school, I competed in sports, loved doing that, fished a lot of ponds, and just kind of got introduced to tournaments and did them really more as fun. And then when I went to college, I didn't want to play one sport year round. I wanted to just do whatever. And then I found real quick that I had a competitive itch that I needed to scratch, and the tournaments became that competitive fire that I was able to kind of utilize. So I did that and just kind of fell head over heels into the tournament aspect of it. And first couple years, I was donating a lot, and then I had a couple different mentors that really kind of opened my eyes. And Ed Lochran was one of those mentors. Dr. Greg South was another one. Rick Hawkins was another one. Those guys kind of opened my eyes on exactly what I needed to be doing. And then once I really kind of got with those guys, my tournament performances started doing better. And I said, okay, maybe I can make a career out of this. And that's really kind of the direction I went.
So talk to us a little bit about the progression of size tournaments you started fishing to obviously making it to the Bassmaster Elite Series. Talk about the stepping stones that you took, obviously, to make the Elites.
Yeah, I was just fishing, kind of local regional type tournaments. I started out when I was in high school, I was fishing some just local tournaments, team tournaments, and I was fishing, and back then they were called Redmans, BFL type tournaments as a co-angler. And I fished with a bunch of different guys. I mean, guys that have done well, guys that have won tournaments. Rodney Sorrell, I fished with him when I was probably 16 or 17. Rodney finished second in the Bassmaster tournament that I finished third in my first year on tour, or my first year out. It was an invitational back then. So it was just kind of funny how small the little world of bass fishermen really is, and just met some really good people, and just kind of stepped up from there. When I graduated college, then I jumped into fishing the FLW tournaments as a co-angler. I jumped into the invitationals, is what they were back then. They weren't the opens; they were invitationals, because everybody basically was a boater. You could sign up as a boater or non-boater, but they always had more boaters than non-boaters. So that was always an interesting situation. But I met a lot of good dudes that way as well.
Surely you got to have some like notable stories, like any stories that stick out as fishing as a co-angler. Like you got to fish with somebody you looked up to, or maybe even a horror story. I tend to enjoy those as well. If you had a really bad
Yeah.
experience.
So my very first tournament was on Old Hickory. My very first Bassmaster event. It was an invitational, and it was boat on boat. And so I drew this guy. He was an older guy. When I say older, I don't mean like older like I am now. I mean like older as in twice as old as I am now. I probably he had to be in his mid 70s, and so he was very comfortable with everything, and we ended up going in his boat. Well, we get out there. He didn't. He had no confidence in what he was doing. Like he had all this confidence, and then we get out in the water. And I was like, oh, this guy didn't. He didn't know what he's doing. And so we ended up going to everywhere that I wanted to go to, which was cool with me, and we fished side by side. But as we're fishing along, back then, I mean, 10 pounds was a giant bag, right? 2-pounders were gold. We were out there fishing, and all of a sudden, he goes to lift his crankbait up out of the water after he'd made a long cast. He goes to lift it up out of the water, and then I look over and I see his rod just double over, and it was a big boil right at the boat. I was like, oh my god, he just caught. He like one's on. So I grabbed the net. I grab it and I put it over to where the boil was because I figured the fish would come right back up, and it did. So the fish dove down, then it turned around and come straight out of the water. The fish jumped out of the water, and it was a 4+ pounder. It was over 4. It jumped straight out of the water, and I caught it in the net. The crankbait came off. I caught it in the net and put it in the bottom of the boat. And he's looking at his rod, not even looking at the net. He's looking at his rod like, oh man, that fish came off. And I was like, yeah, it's in the bottom of the boat. And he goes, what? I said, it's in the net. It's in the bottom of the boat. He goes, oh my God, you caught that? I'm like, yeah, dude. It's because I had fished team tournaments for the last 3 years straight. Like somebody hooks one, I'm on the net, right?
If your partner breathes, you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he leans up. And so just the whole thing happened within 3 seconds, and he has this 4+ pounder in the bottom of the boat. And I didn't even check up. I just went right to the trolling motor and just kept casting. And he's back there fiddling with that fish. But that was one of those fish. I think if I would have had it, I would have ended up in the money, and I would have gotten a check in my first ever Bassmaster event. If not, it didn't work out that way. I ended up, finishing out of the money. I had a terrible finish, I believe. And the guy that won that tournament was Kerry Beaver, a guy that I'm still friends with today.
Yeah, 175th with 411. So you would have doubled your weight with that, and you were absolutely spot on. It might have been way back in 2000, 23 years ago, but you were right. Kerry Beaver won with 24-7, George Cochran 22-8, Chris Elliott and Roger Stiegel the top 3 and 4. That is awesome. We've all probably, Kyle's had some net stories. I've had some net stories in my co-angler days as well. And it's always good when you can flash the leather in the back of the boat and get some respect real quick. But
that's what it was.
That moment in the sport, looking back now, it's 2023 and 2006 when the Elite Series was formed. Where were you at in your career wise? Because that was also one of those 2018 to 2019 moments where kind of the industry split. When the Elite Series was formed, a lot of the guys that we now know, I believe a Clark Windlet, Jay Yellis, Larry Nixon, those guys, went to FLW, and the Elite Series was formed. ESPN was starting to try to make this thing, but it was still like an unknown. Even guys like Jerry McInnes had big decisions to make, where I think Mike McInnes told the story about ESPN coming to Jerry, wanting to have him do the tournaments, TV shows. He ended up going to Forrest and saying, Forrest, if I do this, I have to leave FLW. What do you think? And he said, I think he said this quote, if you want to remain best friends with me, if you want to do it for friendship, stay at FLW. If you want to do it to change the sport, go to B.A.S. and do ESPN. And Jerry, long story short, that's what happened. And so it was very interesting to hear it that way. But we've had a split. It's a lot more crazy in the social media area. era, but what was it like in 2005 to 2006 when this big decision happened between a couple leagues and everything was formed?
It was really different back then because the first couple of years you could fish both, and a number of guys did. I fished both. Ishman Rowe fished both. I know Takahiro did. A bunch of
Kennedy,
guys fished
Hackney,
both.
yeah.
Yeah, fished both tournament trails because we were full-time guys. Like that was all we did. It was fish tournaments, and we just did it full bore. And then for me, the first 2 years, I just was really in the groove with FLW, and I made both. I made the championship the first 2 years. I did not make the classic. I really had terrible Bassmaster seasons, and after those first 2 years, I was like, man, I'm having all this success over here, not as much success on Bassmaster. My career's not going the direction I thought it would after having this type of success on one trail or the other. So I told my dad, I said, I'm going to make the Bassmasters Classic next year. Like, period. I'm making it. I'm going to make the Classic next year. Like, I'm not going to put as much time and effort into FLW. I am going to do this on the Bassmaster side, and that's exactly what I did the next season. I made the Classic. I'll never forget. I was at Table Rock was the last event that year, and the first day I had a huge bag. I think I had read it 20 pounds or almost 20 pounds, and that was enough weight to where I didn't even need to catch a fish the second day. I knew I had already made the Classic. I knew I was in the money. I was going to finish in the top 30 or so, and I was done. And I remember calling my dad and saying, "Hey, I did it. Like I'm in. I'm in the Classic." And he's like, "Wow, that's awesome." He was so happy for me. He said, "You don't." He told me, he said, "You don't sound very happy." And I said it was, instead of feeling like a huge relief, I said, "Dad, I feel this odd, weird pressure that now that I've done it, I feel like I should do it every season." And it was just this weird, odd pressure of, it was relief at the same time, but now all of a sudden I'm like, man, now I know I can do it, so now I feel like I should do it every year. I tell I joke with my kids like that, when their first report card would come home with all A's, and I'm like, well, you messed up now. Like, what is that? Now you can do it every time. And so that was kind of the pressure that I felt, and that's kind of the way I feel ever since then.
Seems like you saying that makes me remember. I guess it was Greg Hackney during his 2014 AOY at Cayuga. I remember on the TV show he was like mad as all get out because he was doing fine in Angle of the Year, was probably going to win, but was about to possibly win the tournament, and he was like mad cussing on camera because he's like it's always something. He's like, there's always something. You can never be satisfied. Like there's always that next step or that next thing that you got to be worried about. So that is the added pressure that I think most of the fans and people that think that professional bass fishing is just all glitter and glamour probably don't understand. It is a lot of pressure. John, obviously, we haven't even really talked about the missile base thing, how that started, when that started. It seems like everybody knows somebody from their hometown that started a bait company or did something. It just
Right.
fizzles out. Like, I'm just curious to know, like, when this started for you, like what the idea was, when it happened, kind of how it developed. And then, did you have the foresight to see that it was going to turn into what it is today?
So you kind of touched on something with Hackney, and in that the one common thread amongst like all the elite guys is that they're a different breed, man. They're all hungry. They're ultra competitive and do whatever kind of it takes to excel. And the same thing, kind of flips over to the bait company side. I'd worked for a bunch of different companies in the industry. I found myself without a soft plastic sponsor, and I did that for 2 full seasons. So I just used whatever I wanted to. And when I did that, it really opened my eyes. I said, man, there was a bunch of baits that I wanted. Like I had these designs in my head, but I had no way to make them happen. So I really put it together a business plan to start a soft plastics lure company. Um, the people at D&J Plastics, Scott Montgomery and his dad, Dennis, the whole family actually, I mean, they really helped guide me in a number of ways, from the business on the business side of it. But I started Missile over 11 years ago, and working in the industry, I thought I knew a lot about the industry and how to run a bait company. But once I started Missile Baits, I realized how little I did know. I didn't know as much as I thought I did. It's kind of like tournament fishing. You think you know everything until you actually go do it, and then you're like, "Wow, I don't really know as much as I thought I did." But luckily for me, what really helped is that I had a ton of contacts and a bunch of friends in the industry, and that's really what helped Missile Baits become successful. Is that I didn't claim to know everything, but I would call everybody that I mean, Sid from Spro. I would just I'd call a number of people that I didn't even do business with and ask them advice. People at Ferris Brothers Distributors, Pittman Creek Distributors. Like, I would call these people and just say, "Hey, I know we're not doing business together, but can you help me set up my margins? And can you, like, what do you guys want?" And this kind of stuff. I just asked them, and they were super honest. And I really think that, being an Elite Series angler was a huge benefit, because it would get people to answer the phone, so that I could ask them the questions to really help get Missile Baits going.
You couldn't just Instagram DM or tweet them, and stuff. You had to actually like call them, and hopefully they answer, or you get the voicemail and it's not full. That's the goal. But so you started Missile Baits, you said, about 11 years ago. So that would be 2011, 2012, somewhere in that range. 2012.
Yep.
And then the next year, or that was just 2 years after your first win, right? 2010 Stockton, you win by 1 ounce at the Delta. That obviously is a good nest egg of money and a big moment in your career to then validate, starting a business and getting that jump start. I wanted to share a story. I went and found this email as soon as Kyle brought up the whole Missile Baits thing. So this is really bad. And just know that this was over a decade ago, March 25th, 2013. John, this is Ronnie Moore from East Carolina's bass fishing team. The team members and I wanted to congratulate you on an awesome third place finish at Falcon Lake this weekend. You are now a part of the Century Club, and no one can ever take that away from you. Also, you are sitting 8th in Angler of the Year already. You might as well go win the AOI title if you're going to be in the top 10. Congrats, and we hope to hear from you soon. Safe travels and tight lines the rest of the season. I can't wait to send you pictures once our jerseys get here to show off Missile Baits. Best of luck and skill, Ronnie Moore and the ECU bass fishing team. So that is super cool and awesome that you even that I even had your email, but that you would even put up with that crap getting sent to you while you're probably driving back from Zapata, Texas after getting a third place finish, probably making phone calls, and you get a buzz from your phone and it's an email from some kid in college. So but that goes to show that
we met at the Raleigh Fishing Expo, and you were with the East Carolina fishing team. I remember that.
Yeah, and so you were one of our first logos on our jersey, that mattered.
Yeah,
so
man.
that was super cool. I ended up going and catching a couple key fish at Norman in a regional on one of your baits. So we'll talk about that later. But so that progression from winning an Elite Series event, let's go to there, because we kind of started Missile Baits, and that was right after your win. Tell us about that first breakthrough title. We made a big deal about your 2022 win, and it being, a decade or more since your first elite title, and that, hey, you still got it, you still can compete. That 2010 event, like you said, you wanted to make classics, you wanted to compete, and winning by an ounce in California against a California guy in Skeet Reese, that had to be one of the craziest weeks of your life, especially with the weather y'all were given for that event.
Yeah, it was. We had it was like the coldest weather of the whole season. I had probably the worst practice I've ever had for a tournament. I think I only caught maybe like 5 or 6 fish in 3 days of that tournament. And I remember, I was rooming and staying with Ish Monroe, I was telling Ish, I'm like, man, I have no clue what I'm going to do. I just don't know how to even catch a fish. He said, man, you can go to this other area that you haven't been to, got a good chance or just go with your gut and go where you think you can get bit. I said, all right, well, I think I'm going to just go around this Italian slough area. I got 2 bites in there. Both of them were quality fish, but I fished in there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and those were the only 2 bites I got. But all right, I'll just go there. And so I went there first thing in the morning. I was fishing outside of Italian, actually, not in the Italian slough. I was fishing outside of that with a little John crankbait. I catch a little teeny bass. I had not had a small bass, in 3 days. I catch this tiny bass. I grab it. I was getting ready to just toss it back, and I said, "Man, this thing may be 12 inches long. Let me just look at it." And sure enough, it was like 12 and an eighth. I'm talking like a 12 ouncer. I threw it in the box, and then the rest of that day, I caught three more fish. All of them were 4+ pounds. So that first day, I had 15 pounds in 4 fish with one like line burner in there, and ended up winning by 1 ounce. I almost tossed back that fish that was the difference. It's just it's funny how these little teeny things, you look back on it, you're like, oh my gosh, I almost threw it away, and or didn't do something to where I would have stayed in there. That Italian slough area, a lot of people would come in and fish and then leave because there was this slime that was all over the hydrilla. Every single punch that you made with that bait, you had to pull the slime off by hand because that stuff was really thick. It was really annoying. It was tedious, and that's why nobody would stay in there for more than like 30 minutes because you had to pull that slime off every single cast. But that was just what I did, and ended up staying in there for the next 3 days and ended up winning the tournament.
Well, that obviously means that there's going to be less pressure. You're not seeing guys hunker down in there. And now I don't even know what tournament mindsets were back then necessarily, but thinking now that would be like something to tee you off that, hey, not a lot of people are spending a lot of time in here. If I spend time in here, I know they're not getting pressured by other people. So that's funny how it works out, especially with it being so cold. I remember the animation of the bait punching through the mat and then like pulling it up to the top. Like we made an underwater animation from your win of what you were doing once you started punching.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I mean, I remember Pat Golden was fishing in there some, Van Dam was fishing in there some, Randy Howe, Rojas. There was a number of guys that would come through. Like I said, they wouldn't fish more than like an hour or so, and then they would just bail out of there. And then by the time they realized what was in there, because I was, lurking around in the top 5, they didn't, it was too late because I kind of had it to myself once, like day 3, day 4, I had it to myself. I remember, speaking of that, Hackney was up in that top 5. He was in contention to win. I think he may have been even leading going in, or Skeet and Hackney were like 1-2, and I was like 4th or 5th or something going into the last day with like the outside shot to pull it off.
So, John, one thing I've always kind of been curious about is, you take your fishing career and you can pinpoint like moments, obviously like the win just a year ago, and you can say like those times are probably like the most memorable from the fishing side. Like, do you have memories, or like was there a point in time like that you can remember on the bait side of it with Missile that you were like, I finally made it, or like there was a specific moment in time where you're like, this is like actually working out exactly like how I wanted it to?
So yeah, I'll tell you, it's a kind of a neat story. When we first launched, we launched in January, the Raleigh Fishing Expo, which I mentioned earlier. That's where we the first place that we displayed. Dave's Tournament Tackle was, our first retailer that we were working with there. And then our first like big display was at the Bassmaster Classic. And I think that year it was, I want to say it was at Gunnersville. No, I think it was, I can't remember where it was, but I was competing in it. And when we were there, displaying, this guy came by and he was with a distributor, and he said, man, I want to, take this and show it to Dick's Sporting Goods. So this guy, Chris, left his card. I called him after the tournament. We sent him all the information. A bunch of samples. He said, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to, he had a meeting set up with Dick's Sporting Goods. All right, I'm going to go display this and show this to Doug Gunning, who was the buyer at Dick's Sporting Goods. He's a friend now. He works for Pittman Creek. All these industry people are all friends now. It's kind of cool. But so he said, I'm going to go show it to them and see what they say. Well, that week of the meeting was the week of Okeechobee Ish Monroe blowout. First day of the tournament, Ish comes in with 35 pounds, leading the tournament, and he stood up there on stage and said, I caught all these fish on a missile-based D-bomb. Nobody else in the tournament has them because the company's only 3 months old, but that's what they're eating. And so it was kind of like totally different because nobody is leading the first day of a tournament and then tells you what they caught them on.
Yeah.
And so Ish did. The next day, this guy, Chris, goes into the meeting with the Dick's Sporting Goods people. He said, man, I've got this new product I want you to see. And he puts it on the table and they go, oh yeah, that's the D-bomb. That's what Ish Monroe just caught 35 pounds on at Okeechobee. And he was like, wait, what? You already know what he's like, yeah, man, it's all over the internet. John Cruz and Ish Monroe. Yeah. He says, yeah, we'll take these. So he got the, he said, yeah, we'll put them in like 50 stores. We'll give them a shot. We'll try them out. Well, before he could even leave, they had already bumped that up to 100 stores. Well, then the next week he calls me and he said, man, the people from Dick's Sporting Goods just called back and they want to put it in 200 stores. So really it was because of Ish. And
before they had ever sold a bait, they hadn't seen any kind of returns. Yeah.
They upped it from 50 to 100 to 200, mainly because Ish, won the tournament on the D-bomb. They upped their store count to 200 stores. That was a huge bump for us, in our first year. So we went, just from doing a handful of retailers to boom. It just really took off with that huge lump. And I had that check, that first check we got from that distributor. I had that framed in my office for the longest time. A copy of it, not the actual.
I was about to say,
check. I had a copy of it framed.
Bust the frame if you ever need cash.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's absolutely phenomenal. And now, how many do you know currently in, at your, or maybe at the peak, obviously as ebbs and flows of where you decide to put retail stores? Do you know what your peak was for maybe Dick's Sporting Goods specifically, since we're on that store topic?
I don't know how many stores that they ended up putting it in. But I know we were in at least 200 stores, and we had a good run with them. But we do limited business with Dick's Sporting Goods now. But our distribution channels are basically wide open with everything else. And I'm still friends with Shane, the guy that's the buyer there now. But they have an interesting, different business model, and we do what we do, and they do what they do, and it doesn't really. They jump on a lot of the trendy stuff now as far as Dick's Sporting Goods go. And we're not exactly trendy. We're more of like a constant brand, so to speak.
Well, and then you see the guys like Tackle Warehouse pop up huge and lean into their niche, obviously, which is all hot topics, and obviously wanting to keep the go-tos in stock, and the academies come around. And like you said, all those Pittman Creek shows and Raleigh Bass shows are important because it meets all those places that are wanting to have what anglers want. And I know, Kyle, you've worked on that side of the industry as a tackle shop manager and wanting, hearing people what they want to have or noticing what people buy. I'm assuming that you put in quite a few orders for, hey, John, I know you're fishing an elite event, but can you guys send us some baits, please? We're running out.
That was the first place I met John Cruz, was at a Big Rock Tackle show. Yeah, we spent some time around each other at a handful of shows before. That was still when I was still at JM, and kind of he took the time, even though he probably didn't care, to listen to my story and kind of what I was doing. And now here we are. We're talking about it on a podcast, so you can't beat that. And you know, that's one thing too I've always been curious about, and I've always thought super sick is, you know, you guys clearly take a lot of input from different retailers, different regional places. I feel like you guys have to lead the league in like specialized colors. Like for certain areas, it seems like every like local cool tackle store I go to has a special color of D-bomb. And if those were worth like as much as Jordan's, I swear I'd be rich because I think I own all of them. I don't ever get to fish them because I don't even fish anymore hardly, but I feel like I
Amen.
have all of them. Like even as big as you guys have gotten, like is that like something that you guys still are, you know, find to be super important and try to be like regionally accessible and like, you know, have colors and things like that?
So we try to still cater to individual tackle shops, and we have a program that people can get special order colors in pretty much whatever bait that they want. We're not above doing that. We'll take the time to do a special run color for people, and so for the last probably 3 years or so, we haven't done any new mainline colors for a D-bomb, but we've done probably 5 or 6 each year for special run colors in that D-bomb. So it's kind of the way that we continue to pop out new colors and keep new things in front of people. That Blanked company, they've come out with a couple of new colors recently. They've done a couple special runs. I mean, Pittman Creek's got their colors. Tackle Warehouse has theirs. So it's kind of interesting just to see the life of a certain product. You kind of starts to fizzle out, but then all of a sudden these new colors come along, and then you got to snag them.
You got idiots like me that'll buy them all.
Right, right, yeah.
He ends
Yeah,
up having just
it's
a Plano or a Flambeau of just D-bombs, and he's got another his stock bag that's just got a color in each slot because he's got so many.
Got so many
yeah,
D-bombs, and I'm just looking for reasons to go to Gunnersville and punch because I've got too many D-bombs to go from now to the end of my lifetime.
yeah. You got to go through them, man. Got to punch them up.
John, one thing that Kyle just mentioned, you know, you guys catering to certain places, getting colors. Another thing, it seems like you're always a forward thinker. I feel like, I know those people in Virginia are lovers. You know, that's their slogan. They're a little weird up in Virginia at times, but your way of thinking about things is always unique to me because it seems like it's not just like, well, if people are going to buy D-bombs, I'm going to just sell them D-bombs. It's like, no, what's the next thing? And that's like kind of a vibe we feel at JM, where Bassmaster Live is produced, and here in Little Rock, it's cool. We had a great year of Bass Live. How do we make it better? What's next? What do we do? And it's never settling. Right. And so you guys have done recently collaborations with swim baits in different colors. You collaborated with Robo Worm on different things. It seems like you are not afraid of getting out of your comfort zone there and talking to people in order to either bring something back that's fading away or to use what's good from them and make your stuff better. What's that been like? You guys also have ventured out, obviously, some of your still aligned sponsors for yourself personally, but like the pond kits and the punching kits and the finesse kits, like those different things that you have done along with the collaborations always seem unique to me. And it seems something different than any other, you know, business in the industry that is, they never want to shine light on somebody else.
Yeah. We at Missile Baits, we have a lot of great relationships with other retailers, with companies that are our competitors, really. I mean, like Robo Worm is a really interesting, unique company, a small company. They're really good at what they do. I just happened to get to know their general manager, not their owner, Greg, but I got to know their general manager at a show, and we just got to talking. And I said, I mentioned, I was like, man, I wish you guys could make worms for us. And he's like, well, actually, we've been thinking about doing that. I was like, say no more. Let's make this happen. So next thing you know, they're coming out with I designed the magic worm. They cut the molds, and next thing you know, we're selling Robo worms. And it's worked out. It's worked out good, dude. Those things are just so much cash money, man. They catch so many fish. One of our bomb squad guys, Kyle Patrick, He's up there in the top 10 in the EQ, Opens EQ right now. He's caught like all but 2 of his weigh fish throughout this whole season on the Magic Worm. Like he just goes to it. He said, "Man, every time I need a fish, I just pick that thing up and puts them in the boat." So you got guys like that are died into it already, and there's so many people I feel like just haven't even gotten into it. But going back to those relationships, that is something that we pride ourselves on at Missile Baits, is utilizing the partnerships and the friendships that we have within the industry. And that's really where all those glide baits and swim baits for whether it's tater hog, or the last one's bull shad, we did clutch swim baits. Like all these people are just friends of ours in the industry, and we're helping kind of throw some light towards them and help them sell some more baits. I mean, like everybody knows who Spro is. I mean, they can't get enough of those KGB Chad Shads in stock right now. But so we just think it's fun to kind of do that and just utilize our relationships.
So last bait related question or missile related question, I wish I remember what year exactly it was, but you had a column on Bassmaster.com where you talked about like the mindset of Missile as a company, in the sense that you're not going to try to recreate a Cinco. But I mean, and you were going into like name brands, talking about like recreating a hookworm. We're not recreating, these things that have already been created. You wanted to and have come out with new things that are new, that are different. And it seems like ever since then, every time you guys release something, I think to myself, is that still true? And it seems to be true. So my question is, like, when you go through, the development process, like figuring out what, maybe the needs are for a new bait, or just like how you come up with those ideas. Does that come from, obviously I guess not just you personally, but like your pro staff, like from, feedback from customers? How do you like come up with a new idea? And then tell us about like the development process once you have that idea to like production. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's there's all kind of different ways that it kind of get ideas from. A lot of it is like, man, we need to do this because that's what I'm fishing, what I want to fish with. That's generally how it works, is that I want to fish with something, and we'll end up designing our version or our twist or whatever to it. And the next bait we've got is like a newer category, like the I call it the crawl body worms. The Yamatanuki kind of set the stage for that. I mean, we've been working on this thing since last year.
Yeah, but we're just cover
scat
scat or whatever, all those different types of turd looking things.
Yeah, that whole new category is interesting to me. But we're doing our version, and it's not like the Yamatanuki is a bait that you use like a bait with a bait caster. It is not a spinning. That's a heavy ass little bait. But the smaller one may be a different story. But the bigger one, the 3.5, it's a heavier bait. Like, so we're doing a 3.5-inch version, but it's kind of more of on the finesse side. You can definitely still use it on a spinning rod, or you can use it on a bait caster. We're calling it the Bomba 3.5, but it's, I mean, like I said, I've had this design for since last fall, but it's taken time to get the mold done and finished and get the thing in production. So here in the next by the end of the month, by the end of June, we'll have them in stock, and we'll make the full announcement and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of the hot new category, so to speak. But that kind of stuff takes time. We work with a company in Alabama that makes our molds, and over the years we've had to move mold makers because for various reasons. Like one of them just went out of business. They were awful business people, but they made great molds. Then this other one, he had another portion of his business take off to where the molds that he made for soft plastics, just he didn't have time to do it. So we had to move. So we're on like our third different mold company, but the one we use now is they're really good, and hopefully they'll stay good for a while. But that's kind of how we work with that company. Once they're done with the mold, then they send it over to our soft plastics manufacturer, and then we work on samples and prototypes till we get it just right.
I just thought about this. I remember John chirping on social media when other baits come out that are almost exactly like a D-bomb or things like that, because people are like, oh, we made this design. You're like, oh, it looks really familiar. I just remember those things. We don't have to get into that, but are there any rules and laws of copyright? It's like, oh, I'm gonna just change up the fin on this thing just slightly, like if you can quickly, pull the curtain back on that, is there kind of a list of things that all these other companies abide by that they have to, like, you can't do this, you can't do that? But I mean, a stick bait's a stick bait, or a craw is a craw,
Yeah, it's there's design patents and there's utility patents in the bait field. The design patent, you can design, you can patent like certain type designs, but if you change it, I think it's like 5% or 10% or something, then it's kind of pointless. And like the trick worm, like there's been 10 companies that have done exactly a trick worm. But they don't have any design patents on it. But it would be kind of pointless to have that on there. But there are utility patents, which are a patent on a function of a bait. Like there's the chatterbait has 4 utility patents on the blade to jig head situation. So basically, if you see any, they're like, oh, that gets around the patent. No, actually, you're wrong. It doesn't. They so they will probably end up going after you on the utility stuff. But the design stuff is there's really no rule. And like I said, so many of these companies, I mean, whether it's Pradco or Zoom or American Bait Works, like all these people become friends, and everybody, you're like, oh, you got to do your version of it. It's kind of the way you look at it. Like everybody's doing the cover scat type situation now. It's like, well, everybody's going to kind of do it. But it actually, in my opinion, when everybody does a different version of something, it legitimizes that category. So it actually makes the baits easier to sell, and for the customer, it makes them easier to know how to use, because you're going to have the people at Yamamoto, you're going to have the people at Spro, they're coming out with one. You're going to have all these different companies that are explaining how to use this bait. So now you don't have to do the entire education piece. You can just talk about how do you use yours, and that part of it's kind of cool. And like nobody gets mad at anybody for doing a different version of something. But if somebody's first to market with something that's totally unique, and then if somebody just dead copies it, most of it, all you're going to get is like an eye roll within the industry, like whatever, good job. Never seen that before.
You're so cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. We have fun with it within the industry. But really, most everybody within the industry, it's kind of like the bass fishermen. The majority of us are good friends, and we don't get all hung up. Like if I'm in the back of a creek and Bill Lowen's back there, I'm like, hey Bill, you mind if I fish this left side? Yeah, no, go ahead, John. It's no problem. I already fished it, but just fish it, man. It's fine. That's just how we are, and within the industry, you have a lot of those friends, and that's basically what it turns into as well. You're like, oh, cool, you did your version of it. Oh, I like that little. I didn't know you could put that little fin on there. What does that do? Oh, it makes it shimmy more. Okay, cool. Yeah, good job. Like way to go. That's kind of where it ends up.
It kind of seems like there are those companies that just roll into the pocket and don't ask which side to fish, and they just kind of keep their head down. And then there's some that maybe take the approach, like you said, and do the proper thing to ask for permission. But let's get into fishing before we let you go a little bit. You win in 2010. It's big for your career. It's $100,000. You beat, I believe the top 4 there. It was you, Skeet Reese, Mike Iaconelli and Hackney were in the top 4 around there. There was somebody else that was of note in the top 4 or 5. So of a star-studded, illustrious top 5, the top 5 at your 2022 Elite looked a little different. A lot of people younger in their careers, a lot of people from across different regions of the country. We're seeing the skill sets get versatile. But from that 2010 win, you made 7 straight classics, 11 to 18. And now the last few years, it's, like you don't make the 19, but you make the 20. You don't make the 21, but you make the 22. It just seems like it's every other year. For you during that stretch, though, you win an Elite, you go over a decade without winning one, but you made like 8 classics there in that stretch, 9 classics.
Yeah.
What was John Cruz thinking? Like, hey, I'm at the top of my game, yet I can't break through on a win, but I'm fishing better than I have. This is the most I've ever made in a row. This is over half my classics I've made consecutively because I'm fishing well, but no first places during that time. What's it like for a pro like that, thinking like, hey, this is good, but it could be better?
Yeah, I don't know. I think during that classic run, I really I don't know if it was like I forgot how to win a tournament kind of thing, but it was definitely something to where I felt pressure to try to win one. And it was odd because when I would make the top 10, and I'd make 1 or 2 a year, I felt like I had to do something crazy to try to win the tournament, and that's not how you do it. Every one of them is different, but I think I kind of got into a little bit of a rut of trying to do something that was out of the ordinary in order to try to pull something off. And then sometimes you just make top 10s and you're not on the fish to win. Like that's just the way it is. But some of those tournaments, looking back, like when I finished 3rd at Falcon, I was that whole tournament, I should have won that tournament in my opinion. But the 3rd day I messed up and I went to a totally new area thinking that my pattern was going to hold true across the entire lake. So I went, and by the time I realized that I'd messed up, it was too late. And I came back and only had like 15 pounds that 3rd day. And the first day I had over 30. I almost had 30 the last day. If I would have stayed in one of those couple areas that were producing, I probably would have had, mid to upper 20s and probably would have been right there with Combs as far as total weight goes. But some of those tournaments where you look back on it, you're like, man, I messed up, and that cost me the win. Not because I made a mistake on the tactic. When I won at the St. John's, I felt like that the fish were evolving and changing, and I had to stay on top of those fish. So I had a couple different things going on. I had the river was coming on because it was warming up, and then the Rodman deal was going away. And so that was really trying to stay with those fish is I think the reason I won that event.
And Bob Downey might have even had the same thoughts you had when you were at Falcon in 2013 of, if I didn't just have 3 fish on one of the days, then I had 29 and 27, like I win. But you had 2 of the closest wins. We don't really see wins within a pound and a quarter anymore. Even though how close they are on Bass Live, it seems like 2 to 3 pounds is like a winning margin. So to see you win by an ounce and a pound and a quarter, to see other guys like Will Davis win by 2 ounces the way he did, that was the closest win this year. That was the closest margin of victory since 2011 when Swindle lost Toledo Bend to Rojas by an ounce because of a dead fish penalty as well. Will Davis and Brandon Pond, same situation. So tell us about that 2022. Is there any kind of, that's the start of the season, it's a place you have really good success. You told us on the podcast that the only year you didn't have success, you were like dead as a dog and you were just surviving on that week of the tournament. What's the deal with the St. John's for you? And then living in that week, did you feel at any point in the tournament that you were going to win it? Because a lot of guys say that, no one ever feels that they're going to win a tournament when they win it. But at a certain point in the event, you might be like, I'm not trying to make a cut. I'm not trying to make a top 10. Like, I think I can win this one if I do it right.
So at the St. John's, it's a place that I kind of grown to really like, and I love the tidal aspect of it. I like all tidal fisheries. I don't discriminate, whether it's the Delaware River, the Sabine, or the St. John's. I like tidal fisheries, and I'm
Delta.
still amazed. I'm still amazed to this day at the number of professional anglers that don't pay attention to the tides. I'm like, what are you doing? I think that's one of the reasons that I typically have better tournaments is because I pay attention to the tides. Like Iaconelli, same deal. Like he grew up on the Delaware River. I grew up on the James River and the Potomac River. Um, it's second nature. Like you just fish different types of stuff, whether when the tide's coming in or it's going out, whatever like that. But at the St. John's last year in 22, after the second day of the tournament, I was leading after the first day, and then I was leading after the second day. Well, after I was leading after, for some reason, I slept for like 3 hours, and then I woke up at like 2 in the morning, and I couldn't go back to sleep. Like my mind was just racing, thinking about everything's changing. Everything's changing. What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Should I try this area? Should I try that area? What do I need to do? And I could not go back to sleep. And so I mean, my light was on. I was up. I was just looking at Google Earth on my phone, doing whatever. And I never forget that next morning, Ed Lochran was like, he said, "Man, I got up at like 2 to go to the bathroom, and I saw that your light was on." He's like, "Were you okay?" Like, yeah, I didn't go back to sleep.
I was just
I was
tying
up
my
at like
knots all
1:30.
over again.
Yeah, I was up. I was just up, and he was like, "Oh my gosh." And he's like, "Why?" I was like, "I think I'm going to win this tournament." Like I mean, it's easy to say that when you're in the lead, I guess, but I just that was when like the big knot got in my stomach because I knew I could win the tournament and I should win the tournament. The same thing kind of happened after at the Delta after the second day of the tournament. Um, I had a good bag. The second day, I think I had like 21 pounds, jumped up into the top 5 or whatever it was. And when I get back to Ish's house, I'm talking with Ish and Mike, and I told both of them, I said, "Look, if I can get enough bites each day, I can win this tournament." And they're like, "What? Why do you say that?" And I said, "Well, the first day, I may have had I think I had a 7-pounder the first day, but I think the second day I had 2 7-pounders. I was like, I've seen a lot of big fish in this area. Like the winning fish are in this area. I just need to get enough bites." And that's when I went down to that BB cricket. I put it on fluorocarbon, doing everything I could to try to just get more bites. And that was really the first time I'd ever felt like I was on the right fish to win, was there. And I ended up winning that tournament. And then at the St. John's, that's when I was like, I had that same feeling like I should win this tournament. So there's just kind of like weird, freaky events. I wish I would have that feeling more often, to be honest. It'd be pretty cool.
Well, if you wake up
John-
any Saturday morning of an Elite Series event and you feel that way, just text me and Kyle. We won't say anything until Sunday, but we'll remember it. We'll remember it when it happens. Say, hey, John texted us yesterday. He said he got that same knot in his gut, and Kyle will know to come take photos of you.
Yeah, y'all can, and then y'all can go on live, not knowing to me, I could be like, "Yeah, I think Cruz is going to win this tournament. I just have a feeling."
This person or the field. Well, I'm not going to choose the field. I'm going to pick Cruz specifically. I got a feeling.
Right. I just got a feeling. Yeah.
I gotta tell the story because you mentioned a minute ago with the tides and how you were shocked that more people don't pay attention to the tides and fisheries. The last time we had you on the podcast was while you were practicing at the Harris Chain, and you told a story about Wes Logan fishing in that area, and you had mentioned something about the tide, and he responded back something to the extent of, "Oh man, I'm not even paying attention. Like I don't even know anything about the tides." So
Yeah.
I went and showed him that podcast clip. He and I went fishing on Logan Martin, and we laughed till we about cried at him you telling that story. He thought that was the funniest thing.
Wes is a great guy and a great fisherman, but he didn't grow up fishing, tidal fisheries, so it is a little bit foreign to him. But even at the Sabine just this past month, I was talking to Logan Latuso, a guy that grew up fishing South Louisiana and tides, and I told him, I said, man, it would have been nice because we were one of the areas we were around each other. I said, man, it'd be nice if we could have a little more incoming water. And he goes, really? Well, I don't even know what the tides are. I'm like, you're not paying it. Like, Logan, come on, dude. Like, you know what to do, and why would you even say that? That just boggled my mind.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is that I've never caught a bass on a tidal fishery, but I watch it, to do stuff at the monitor, at the screen knowledge for showing what the tides are, if there are. And it wasn't a huge swing, but it was important to know that the tide was getting better every morning because it was, obviously high tide gets pushed back an hour each day, that like you had more moving water in the morning. And then when you start seeing some of these areas pop off with numbers in the morning, that's helpful. And especially on a tough body of water, it gives you probably as an angler more confidence if you're like, this is supposed to be a good window. Let me go to my juice and just see. And then it works out. But John, before we let you go, wanted to get your take on it and if this has changed over your life, but do you have any fishing heroes, people that got you excited about the sport, or somebody who took you fishing when you were younger, but then once you became a pro, or that, you had a pro mentor as well, somebody that you had a hero wise, and then has that changed now that you're, long in your career?
So I've had a lot of fishing mentors. Like I mentioned earlier, Ed Lochran's one of those. Rick Hawkins is one of those. Dr. Greg South is another one of those. And they're friends and mentors, and, and it's kind of neat to have Ed as somebody who I would go out with when I was younger, and he taught me stuff. And now, we've been rooming together for the last 5 years on the Elite Series. It's been really cool. But as far as guys that I like, there's guys that I'm still baffled by at how good they are at their ability to make a bass bite. Aaron Martins was one of those guys that just I was baffled. I've always been baffled at how good he was at getting a fish to be a bass to be able to bite. Van Dam has that same ability. It's just it's uncanny and it's unbelievable. Just the different little stuff that they would do to trigger that bass into biting. They don't fish. They don't find stuff that nobody else fishes. They just have a better ability to get those bass to bite. And it's just it's still to this day is I just think back to different situations where I fished around both of those guys. Their ability to make those fish bite is amazing. And we've got a bunch of those guys now on the Elite Series that have that ability. I mean, like, Jay Shakur, he goes up there and wins with over 100 pounds of smallmouth. And like going back and watching it, it was his ability to trigger those fish. Everybody was throwing at the same types of fish, but he figured out a way to trigger those smallmouth to bite better than everybody else did. And, for him to kind of come out of nowhere and do that, that just shows the skill level where it's at now. But yeah, those are some of my guys that I've, Aaron's definitely one of them.
Well, I think that there's probably some people who look at John Cruz these days, Kyle, and probably for how many hats he has to wear, is that's pretty cool to still have a successful career in all aspects. But John, before we let you go, I always like to ask elite guys whenever I hang out with them in person or over the podcast sometimes. I know you don't hate any bodies of water, and I know you don't love any bodies of water, but are there maybe 1, 2, 3 places that you would love to see on the Elite Series schedule in the future? Places that we maybe haven't been in a long time, or places we've never been, or just some recommendations, just in case Kyle and I ever get a say, we'll drop a mention. I know that you got more weight and text power than we do, but I'm always interested to hear. I'm always interested to hear some places that are unique if we were to formulate an elite angler driven schedule.
I think we should just go to all tidal fisheries. That would be fine with me. We'll like start on, just go from like James River, the St. John's over to the Sabine, and then just kind of like loop back around to the Delaware. Just stay on the tidal rivers. That'd be fine with me. Anything. If you look back at my career record on tidal fisheries, like I didn't even realize how good it was until My dad was actually looking at it this past year because he said, "But you've always done good on the Sabine." And I'm like, I mean, I think I got a couple top tens there. And he's like, "No, you have two 20, like a 27th and a 26th and a 5th and a 6th." I was like, oh, dang, I didn't realize that, those are my 4 finishes there before I went there. And then I was in 82nd place after the first day. I was like, oh my God, I can't screw this record
Not
up.
my
Like, I
record.
cannot do this. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to screw up my Sabine record. So then I was able to jump all the way up to 18th before that was all said and done.
Well, I
John,
think that I'll be sending him an email, Kyle, like I did in 2013. If you're going to be in the top 10 at AOY right now with all title fish, you might as well win AOY. That's what I'll be saying next
Might
year.
as well. Yeah, exactly.
this might be the most random question I've ever asked anybody on the podcast, but you seem to probably have I don't know how many contacts you have in your phone, and based on the TikToks that I see of people walking up to people asking who the most famous person on your contacts is, who is the most famous person in your phone right now? I'm just curious.
Well, we were FaceTiming with Aaron Lewis last night, so I'd say Aaron.
He's not just in his phone; he actually like uses the contact, that's a key thing.
Yeah,
Kyle.
him and Byron were hanging out, and so they FaceTimed me yesterday, and so before we went to dinner, we were shooting the breeze, talking shop about baits, and he was giving his input on what he wanted to see soft plastic wise. It's kind of funny.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Don't let him just start a bait company like Whiskey Myers did. I know that those musicians are sneaky if they like bass fishing. They'll just start up a bait company. John, I appreciate you taking time out of your beach vacation to talk with Kyle and I on the Bassmaster podcast. I know that you have your hat all in the industry on the Elite Series, and I know you don't have much time off, so appreciate you doing that, and best of luck the rest of the year. You're right there in the middle of the pack, 50th place in Angler of the Year. I know you're wanting to make it back to the Bassmaster Classic. Grand Lake's a good place to always fish, and I know that time of the year it could be an awesome week for the Classic next year.
For sure. It's kind of funny. Typically when if I was in 50th place going into the last 3 tournaments, I would be like, oh man, I'm at 50th. Like, that's a big mountain to climb. But the last couple tournaments have been good tournaments, and I feel like I'm on the progression going up. So I feel like, I'll just have 3 decent tournaments. I'll be fine. So that's kind of the way I feel right now. We'll see what happens at, St. Clair, but I feel like that, 3 decent tournaments is very possible. And that's kind of where my mind is right now. As long as I have 3 decent tournaments, and I'll be good.
One of the best early season Elite Series guys. If John's not in the top 20 points after the first event, he will be normally after the second event. Normally carries that into a good Classic finish as well. We definitely saw that in 2020 and beyond. But John, appreciate you, and we will see you down the road at Lake St. Clair for the 7th stop of the Elite Series season and the first stop of the Northern Swing.
That's right. I appreciate you guys having me on again, and look forward to seeing you guys real soon.